The email came in just after 9. No subject line, just the sender, HR department. I was standing in the hallway of my apartment, one shoe on, tote bag slung over my shoulder, keys between my fingers. I tapped the notification and scanned the message without blinking. We regret to inform you. I didn't drop the keys. I didn't sit down. I just stood there, surrounded by silence as the words settled around me like dust. My breath stayed even. My posture didn't shift. They'd chosen someone else. 4 rounds of interviews, 11 years at the company, 5 of those grooming me for that role. My name had been floated as a frontrunner, unofficially, of course. The kind of nod people give in hushed tones, just loud enough for you to hear. I'd been promised nothing, but everything pointed to yes, until that email. I stared at the screen, rereading the sentence like maybe it would rearrange itself. Maybe I'd misread. But I hadn't. Another candidate has been selected. Another. That was the word that caught. Not better, not more qualified. Just another. The silence didn't break until my phone vibrated again. This time, a group chat, ping. My department. The new hire announcement. I clicked. A headshot loaded slowly. And there she was, my sister. Same last name. Same smile she used to fake her way out of detention in high school. Titled beneath her picture in bold font, Senior Strategic Partnerships Manager. My job. The one I'd built from the ground up. The one she knew I'd been chasing for years. My stomach didn't drop. I didn't gasp. I just stood there, frozen in that narrow hallway, watching the shape of betrayal take form. She'd known. She'd always known. And still, she took it. Not just the job, but everything it stood for. And in that moment, something shifted. Not a crack. Not a break. A decision. She may have gotten the title, but she had no idea who she'd just made an enemy of. Not yet. But she would. It wasn't the announcement that haunted me. It was the timing. 3 weeks before, she'd come over with takeout and cheap wine. Said she missed our girl nights. We sat on my couch, me in sweats, her in effortless business casual, laughing over old stories, pretending the years between hadn't splintered us. I'm thinking of applying to something new, she'd said, sipping Pinot. Just exploring. You know how it is. I remember nodding, distracted. My final interview had been that morning. I told her how it went. She asked questions. Specific ones. The names of the panel, what kind of presentation I gave, what tech I used. She even jotted something down in her phone, said it was just a note to remind herself how corporate interviews were changing. I thought she was interested in me. I didn't realize she was gathering intel. The betrayal didn't come as a scream. It arrived as a whisper in the back of my mind, a suspicion too absurd to name. But once it planted itself, it grew. 2 nights after the announcement, I stayed late at work. My old manager, Dev, stopped by my desk. He leaned on the divider, his expression cautious. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. He paused. "I thought for sure you'd get it." "Me too." His eyes flicked away, uncomfortable. Her presentation was familiar. The deck she used looked like yours. That's when the whisper turned into a roar. I kept my face still, asked questions, careful and even. Dev hadn't seen the back end, but he remembered the structure, the color scheme, the language. It had been tailored for me, for my metrics, my voice. I went home that night and opened my laptop. My work files were secure, My personal email hadn't been touched. But when I checked my company account's login history, the timeline didn't add up. There was a login 2 days after my final interview, a time I was out of the office. The IP didn't match my home, and I knew exactly whose did. The realization settled into my bones like frost. She hadn't just applied. She'd watched me build that deck, copied my work, and submitted a replica. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking. I didn't cry. I didn't call her. I didn't even curse. Instead, I opened a blank document and started typing a timeline, a record, a beginning. Because if she thought she'd gotten away with it, thought I'd swallow the loss like some unlucky fluke, then she didn't understand me at all. This wasn't a setback. It was the start of something. She'd stolen a position. She'd rewritten a narrative. Now I was going to write one too, and mine would end with her name off the door, permanently. We weren't always like this. There was a time when she braided my hair before school, when we whispered secrets across twin beds, when I believed we were a team. She was older by 2 years, always faster, louder, the center of every room. I didn't mind. I followed. I learned. In high school, she forged my mother's signature on a late slip and made it look easy. When I asked how, she grinned and said, "Confidence, they only question it if you flinch." That was Jasmine. Back then, I thought it was clever. Later, I'd understand it was something else, something colder. The first crack came in college. We ended up at the same university by accident more than design. Different majors, different friends, but the same dorm for 1 semester. I was in the library every night. She was at mixers, making connections. I envied how easily things fell into place for her, how professors remembered her name after one conversation, how she could wing a group project and still walk out with an A. Then came the plagiarism inquiry, one of her papers flagged for lifted passages. She was almost suspended. I found out because she showed up at my apartment, eyes red, asking if she could stay the night. "They're lying," she said, "or exaggerating. Everyone reuses sources." I believed her. I even defended her, until I saw the original paper in her bag, mine, from a class I took 2 years before. She'd changed the title, moved paragraphs around, but the bones were mine. I'd written it during a summer internship, proud of every line. "You used my work?" I asked, voice low. She shrugged. "You weren't using it, and it got me out of a jam." No apology. Just that, like it was practical, logical. I never told anyone. I should have. But something in me still wanted to protect her. Still clung to the girl who used to braid my hair and guard my secrets. We drifted after that. Polite distance, family holidays, occasional texts. She got into corporate strategy. I built a quiet path in partnerships. We crossed paths just enough to be cordial. When she moved to the same city 2 years ago, I hesitated. But she reached out, said she wanted a fresh start, sister nights, to be close again. I let her in. I gave her wine and job advice. I let her use my printer, borrowed books from my shelves, asked about her dates. I wanted to believe we'd outgrown the past. But some people don't grow. They adapt. They learn how to smile while they sharpen the knife. She didn't just steal a job. She rehearsed it. And as I sat in that memory, every smile she'd given me over the past year began to feel rehearsed too. Sisterhood, it turns out, wasn't immunity. It was the perfect disguise. I waited until the office cleared out. Friday evening, just after 6. The building hummed with silence. Motion sensor lights dimming, doors clicking shut, the cleaning crew still a floor below, I logged into my workstation, closed every unrelated tab, and opened my email. Not to send anything, just to look. My permissions hadn't been revoked, even after the promotion was filled. That told me something. They hadn't seen what she did. Or maybe they hadn't cared enough to notice. I started with my sent folder, filtered by date, looked for anything unfamiliar. That's when I saw it, an email forwarded to an external address I didn't recognize. The subject line was my final presentation. Attached, the full deck, time-stamped one day after my final interview. I clicked the recipient. It wasn't her personal email. It was one of those disposable domains. Something temporary, masked. But the naming pattern was hers. A nickname she used in college, buried in the string. That was the first piece. I dug deeper. My draft folder had been accessed on a day I hadn't logged in. There were edits to the pitch outline. Minor, but telling. She'd adjusted language, tightened points, not just stolen it, refined it. She didn't just copy my work, she studied it. It wasn't clumsy, it was deliberate. She knew my rhythm, knew how I framed value propositions, how I positioned growth metrics. She'd been around just enough to absorb my tone. I checked my calendar next. A meeting invite she'd seen. Final panel briefing. She'd asked about it casually, a day later. How did it go? I told her everything. She nodded like a sister would. I remember she brought me coffee that day, my favorite. Oat milk, 1 pump vanilla. And while I sipped it, she memorized the route to my opportunity. By the time I logged out, I had screenshots, logs, subject lines, IP trails. It wouldn't hold in a courtroom, but it didn't have to. Not yet. What mattered now was certainty, and I had it. When I left the office, the air had turned sharp, spring clinging to the last edge of winter. I walked slowly to the train, my phone heavy in my coat pocket. She thought she could take something like this and I'd fold. Disappear. But I don't disappear. I observe. I document. And now I knew. She didn't win the job. She engineered it. Constructed her success with bricks she stole from my foundation. That's not ambition. That's theft. And I was done making room for it. This wasn't grief anymore. It was strategy. A slow inhale before the move that shifts everything. I wasn't going to call her out. Not yet. I was going to build something better. A consequence she wouldn't see coming. I didn't plan to go to the family dinner, but my mother called 3 times in one day. Left a message on the last ring saying, "It's been too long." There was guilt in her voice, wrapped in concern. She didn't know what had happened. None of them did. So I went. Roast chicken, candles, that same mismatched set of linen napkins. My father poured wine while my mother fussed over the timing of the vegetables. My sister was already seated when I walked in. She stood, smiled too wide, and said, "You made it." I nodded. That was all. We took our usual seats, her to my left, our parents across. For the first few minutes, everything felt normal, hollow laughs, updates about cousins. My mom asked about work. My fork paused midair. I answered carefully. Still in transition. That's when my sister jumped in. "Oh, she's being modest," she said. "She's been in talks with another firm, right?" She looked at me like we were still playing sisters. I didn't look back. Then my father asked about her new position. She lit up. Gave them the rehearsed summary, title, scope, salary. She was so smooth. You'd think she wrote the job description herself, because she did, almost word for word. Mine. My mother beamed. "You girls are both doing so well. I love that you're finally supporting each other." Something in me cracked then. Not anger, not sadness, just a clean, dry fracture. I set my fork down, folded my napkin in half, then I said it. She didn't earn that job. The room stilled. My father blinked. My mother's hand hovered over her glass. My sister let out a soft laugh, like I'd made a joke. Okay, now you're being dramatic. No, I said. Calm, flat. You used my pitch deck. You accessed my email. You copied my interview structure. Her smile froze. What are you talking about? I didn't blink. You stole my work, and you know it. She turned to our parents. She's upset. She didn't get the offer, and now she's lashing out. I kept my hands folded. I have the logs, the email traces, the timestamps. My mother's voice broke the silence. Girls, please, can we not do this tonight? That word, girls, like we were children again, fighting over borrowed clothes. But this wasn't a spat, this was theft. My father looked at my sister, then at me, confused, uncomfortable. But he said nothing, and in that moment, I saw the truth. They wouldn't choose sides, not openly, not when it risked peace. My sister sat taller, smoothed her napkin. Maybe we should talk privately. I stood. No need. I left my plate untouched. Picked up my coat from the back of the chair. No one followed. As I closed the door behind me, the air outside felt clearer, sharper, like the illusion had finally lifted. Whatever was left between us as sisters, it ended at that table, and I didn't mourn it. The first day in the new city, I woke up on a mattress on the floor. No bed frame yet, no curtains, just boxes stacked in corners, and the quiet hum of traffic 6 stories below. I made coffee in silence, the way I always do when something big is ending or just beginning. There was no plan, not a grand one anyway, just a list. Find freelance contracts, rebuild my reputation, keep my head down. I didn't want revenge then. I wanted peace, solitude, a place where her shadow didn't stretch across every meeting room I entered. I picked a place with tall windows and no history, a 1-bedroom with bare white walls and the faint scent of fresh paint. It wasn't home, not yet, but it was mine. The first month, I took small contracts, unsexy work, vendor negotiations, copy revisions. I said yes to things beneath my old title. People looked at my resume and asked why I'd left such a good company. I always smiled and said, time for a change. I didn't mention my sister. I didn't mention the stolen job. That part stayed folded inside me, like a document not yet filed. What surprised me most wasn't how hard it was. It was how quickly I found rhythm again. I woke up early. I responded to emails within an hour. I used what I knew. How to solve problems before they happened. How to build trust in rooms I barely belonged in. One of my first clients asked if I'd ever led a national campaign. I had. I just didn't tell him the results had been pitched under someone else's name. Instead, I built something new from scratch, cleaner, sharper, without her fingerprints. The checks started to come in, small at first, then bigger. Word spread. Referrals followed. By the 6-month mark, I had a full calendar and the beginnings of a wait list. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't public, but it was real. I worked alone, ate alone, spent my weekends with books and long walks through unfamiliar neighborhoods. I liked the anonymity. I liked being no one for a while. What I didn't expect was how strong solitude could feel. No one stealing my slides, No one watching over my shoulder with a smile hiding calculation. Just quiet. And the slow, deliberate layering of a life that belonged only to me. Some nights I thought about her. Wondered if she checked my LinkedIn or asked around, but I never searched her name. I didn't need to know. Because while she was performing success in rooms built with borrowed brilliance, I was building something without shortcuts, brick by brick, skill over spectacle. And the foundation this time was mine alone. I didn't follow her. Not at first. But the internet has a way of delivering what you don't ask for. A connection liked a photo, a former colleague reshared a press release. And there she was, again. Her face in a company newsletter, a quote attached to a project she hadn't touched 5 years ago, a tagline about innovation and pushing the envelope. She was climbing. Director of Strategy within 2 years. Featured in a panel discussion titled Women in Leadership, Claiming Space. I watched a 5-second clip on mute. Her gestures were polished, her smile flawless. The same one she used to wear when we were teenagers, and she was angling for the car keys. I closed the tab, walked to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and stared at the sink. I wasn't angry, just reminded of what she took, of how easily she'd slipped into my seat and called it hers. Some days I thought about exposing her, uploading the logs, forwarding the emails. There was enough to make noise, maybe even cause a stir. But that's all it would be. Noise. Temporary flames, a moment of chaos with no real consequence. And I didn't want chaos. I wanted legacy. So I worked. I built systems. Quiet pipelines that stretch beyond a single company's hierarchy. My clients began to refer me not just because I delivered, but because I anticipated. I started getting invitations to speak, not on stage, but in boardrooms. Private sessions, strategic development, the kind of work that didn't come with applause, but changed decisions behind closed doors. I created templates so clean they could be scaled across continents. And they were. No one clapped. No one tweeted about it. But I started seeing echoes of my work in places I'd never been. That was enough. Still, she kept showing up. A podcast, a trade magazine quote. She's a rising star, one article said. Brilliant strategic mind. She was still borrowing brilliance. But eventually, borrowed things come due. And while she was rising fast, I knew the terrain better. I knew how those rooms worked. How performance eventually demanded substance. So I watched. Not obsessively. Strategically. I saved things here and there. Not for vengeance. For context. For understanding how far the echo reached. She wasn't just surviving in the role she stole. She was building a brand from it. But the higher she climbed, the less room there was for missteps, and the more people you pass on the way up, the more witnesses you leave behind. I wasn't waiting to pounce. I was waiting for the moment when silence would no longer be strength, but strategy. Because you don't dismantle a lie with noise. You do it with truth, in the right room at the right time. The offer came on a Tuesday. A short email. A role description. A proposed salary that doubled what I made at my corporate peak. The subject line read, Director Opportunity, Confidential Discussion. At first, I didn't recognize the sender, a partner at a recruitment firm I'd done some quiet consulting for. We'd worked together once, years ago, on a small rollout for a healthcare client. I remembered him as efficient, measured, the kind of man who noticed without speaking much. I clicked the attachment, scanned the PDF. That's when I saw the company name. Her company. My old company. The one where my career was buried before it could bloom. I sat still for a moment, the cursor blinking at the edge of the screen. Not with shock, not with fear, with something heavier, sharper. I kept reading. The role wasn't just senior, it was high level, oversight across 3 divisions, including strategy, her department. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, not from hesitation, but calculation. Was this poetic? Maybe, but it was also practical. The recruiter's note was clear. They were restructuring, quietly, looking for someone who could lead with clarity, someone with cross-functional expertise, a reputation for results, discretion, and strategic vision. My name had come up, he said. More than once, I wrote. Back before the coffee cooled. 3 interviews, 1 executive panel, a confidential project proposal. I delivered a strategy document in 6 days, tailored, data-backed, scalable. When they offered the position, I asked one question. Who currently leads strategy? There was a pause on the other end of the call. Jasmine Rowe, the HR lead said. But that team will be reorganized under your direction. I said yes, not with revenge in my voice, with clarity. I didn't need to expose her anymore. I was walking into the house she thought she owned, with keys she didn't know existed. I signed the paperwork, sent over compliance forms, set my start date for the following month, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened her profile. Her title hadn't changed in 2 years. Her team had shrunk. 2 resignations listed in the company blog had happened within her branch. I read the names. I remembered the talent. The people she likely sidelined, undercut, or used. And now she reported to no one. But soon she would. To me. I closed the browser, finished my tea, and pulled a notebook from my desk drawer. On the first page, I wrote 3 words: clarity, precision, arrival. Because this wasn't a return. It was a reckoning. Not loud, not rushed, but undeniable. And I was ready. The lobby looked the same. Same polished floors, same glass walls, the same smell of paper and 2 strong coffee lingering near reception. But this time I didn't check in as a candidate. I was the one they were expecting. The new badge clipped easily to my blazer. White lettering, senior clearance. A small detail, but it said everything. I nodded to the front desk staff. Some faces were familiar, though they looked at me now with professional distance. The kind reserved for executives. The elevator ride was silent. My reflection in the brushed steel doors stared back, steady eyes, pressed collar, no hesitation in the line of my jaw. The doors opened on the 10th floor, my floor. The office they'd given me was corner-facing, natural light from 2 angles, clean walls, empty shelves, a blank canvas. I didn't sit. I walked the halls. Some people recognized me immediately. A few whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. But no one approached at first, until Raj from operations rounded the corner and stopped mid-step. "You're back?" I gave a small smile. "Seems that way." He stared for a second, then broke into a slow grin. "Well, damn. Welcome home." We shook hands, firm, respectful, and just like that, the energy shifted. I wasn't a ghost from the past. I was leadership. Midday, I received the org chart. Her name was still there. Same title, same department. 2 dotted lines connecting her to roles that now reported to me. Her authority, no longer direct, no longer final. I studied her branch. Not the titles, the people, the talent beneath her. Some names I remembered from my early days, some new. That afternoon, I held brief introductions with each team. Kept it formal, brief, my voice steady. I didn't mention her. But every word I spoke rewrote the power structure, not with threats, not with announcements, with presence, the kind that doesn't seek permission. At 3:45, there was a knock on my door. I looked up. She stood in the frame, flawless, as always. Tailored jacket, clean lines, the kind of polish that used to intimidate me. It didn't now. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled like this was just another Tuesday. "Didn't know you were joining us." I gestured to the seat across from mine. "Apparently, you'll be reporting into my office." She didn't sit. Her smile faltered just slightly. "I assume we'll talk soon?" I nodded. "End of week one-on-ones, standard review cycle." She blinked, as if searching for a softer path through the moment, but there wasn't one. Not anymore. She left without saying anything else. And as the door clicked shut, I let the silence settle. This wasn't revenge. It was order. The structure returning to what it should have been all along. And I wasn't here to remind her of the past. I was here to rebuild the future without her fingerprints. The boardroom hadn't changed. Still cold, still too much glass, still that long table where decisions used to echo past me as if I wasn't there, as if my insights were borrowed, not built. But this time, I didn't sit at the edge. I took the seat at the head. The meeting started at 9 sharp. Department leads filed in with notepads and guarded expressions. Some I remembered from before. Some I didn't. They greeted me cautiously, waiting to see what kind of leader I'd be. I didn't make speeches. I asked questions about current projects, bottlenecks, team morale. I watched the way eyes flicked toward one another before answers came. I noted the pauses, the hesitations. They weren't afraid of me. They were afraid of change. When it came time to review the strategic partnerships team, her team, no one spoke first. So I did. "I've seen the quarterly reports. Impressive growth on paper," I said. "But I'd like more detail, not just metrics, methodology." A few glances passed across the table. Then someone spoke, Amanda, mid-level manager. I remembered her from a product launch I once salvaged. Smart, careful. "There's been some inconsistency," she said. "Good ideas, but execution's been uneven. High turnover lately." "Why?" She hesitated. "Alignment issues? Mixed messaging." I made a note, not on my laptop, on paper, deliberate. The rest of the meeting rolled forward. Marketing updates, budget revisions. IT flagged a concern about access permissions, outdated credentials still active. I filed that away. By the time we adjourned, I had more than notes. I had direction. In the hallway, Amanda caught up to me. "I didn't want to say too much in front of everyone," she said, voice low. "But we've lost 3 analysts in that department in under 6 months. 2 transferred, 1 resigned without notice." "All under her?" Amanda nodded. "Any formal complaints?" She shrugged. "Nothing documented. People didn't think it would matter." It would now. I thanked her. Didn't promise anything. Just listened. That afternoon, I sent a quiet memo to HR. Requested anonymous feedback loops. A review of exit interviews. I wanted patterns, names, timelines. Not to punish, to understand. Because when you're rebuilding a house, you need to know where the rot is. I didn't call my sister in. Not yet. I wanted the full picture. Not just of what she'd done, but of what she'd left behind. She rose fast, too fast. Her success was built on scaffolding she didn't reinforce. And now, cracks were showing. Cracks she could no longer patch with charm. The organization was shifting, silently, structurally. And I wasn't lifting a finger to destroy her. I was just letting the truth breathe and watching what collapsed on its own. She knocked on my door again 3 days later. This time, there was a different look in her eyes. Not fear, not yet, but something close. A flicker of uncertainty in the space where confidence used to sit. "Got a minute?" she asked. I nodded. Closed the door. She sat without waiting for permission, crossed her legs, smoothed her skirt. All performance. "I just wanted to say, congratulations," she said. "The team was surprised, but I think it's great, us working together again. Us, like we'd ever really worked together." "I'm reviewing all departments," I said. "We'll have time to talk more formally during your one-on-one." She blinked. "Of course. I just thought I'd touch base early, clear the air." I waited. She smiled. Tight, polite. "I know we've had differences, but I want you to know I'm committed to being a team player." "Good," I said. "That's the expectation." Her posture faltered just slightly. I didn't elaborate. Let her sit in that pause. Eventually, she stood. "I'll let you get back to it." As she left, I turned back to my notes. She was feeling the shift now. Subtle things. An approval request rerouted to my inbox. A report she submitted flagged for missing data. 2 junior analysts from her team requested lateral transfers, both citing misalignment with leadership style. The system was speaking. I didn't push. I just documented. HR had started sending summaries from past exit interviews. Common phrases emerged. Unclear direction. Dismissive feedback. Recognition given to the wrong people. It was all there. The quiet trail she'd left behind while climbing. Names erased. Efforts repackaged. She hadn't just stolen from me. She made a habit of it. Now the walls were closing in. Not because I forced them, because her structure had no foundation. The following week, she missed a key deadline. A project launch she'd promised for Thursday slid into Monday. No heads up, no explanation. When asked, she blamed resourcing. But 2 of her staff had already flagged the delay. I watched the excuses start to crack. In meetings, she talked more, tried to dominate the conversation, but her words circled, vague, heavy on buzzwords, light on content. The confidence sounded brittle now, like glass under pressure. Her team grew quieter. I didn't correct her in front of them. I didn't need to. I simply asked questions she couldn't answer. "Can you walk me through the framework you used?" Which team member led this segment? What metrics were used to validate the outcomes? Each time her replies thinned. She was unraveling, not all at once, but visibly, and the room was beginning to notice. I wasn't here to humiliate her. I was here to lead, to repair, to restore what she'd hollowed out. And I would do it without raising my voice, because power doesn't shout. It watches and waits. By the time her review came up on the calendar, I already had the file. Not a file she could see. Not the standard HR form with ratings and feedback boxes. This one was mine, built over weeks, line by line, dotted with dates and notes only I understood. I labeled it simply, Assessment, Strategic Lead. Inside were patterns, missed deadlines, inflated metrics, projects credited to her that had originated elsewhere. I traced the chain of execution for one key initiative, a campaign she'd bragged about in 3 separate meetings, and found the core work had been drafted by a junior analyst she barely acknowledged. That analyst had since resigned. No fanfare, no exit interview. Just gone. I made a note. Undermines retention. Across 3 departments, her name appeared in feedback that wasn't addressed to her directly. Frustrations funneled into vague HR summaries, emails worded carefully to avoid conflict. But between the lines, it was clear. People didn't trust her. They tolerated her. And now they were done doing even that. Still, I didn't go into the review looking for drama. I went in for accuracy. The day before, I met with HR privately. I outlined my observations. I kept my tone neutral, measured. No accusations, just facts. They listened carefully. When I finished, the director closed her notebook. If this is all verified, we may be looking at a formal performance remediation. I nodded. Let's give her the chance to respond first. I wasn't there to destroy her. I was there to hold her accountable. There's a difference. That night, I stayed late in the office. The building emptied around me. Outside, the city softened into dusk. I opened my laptop one last time and drafted the structure for tomorrow's conversation. Key responsibilities, outcomes versus expectations. Team feedback summaries. I ended the document with one question. Can you explain your approach to leadership? Not as a trap, as a mirror. I wanted her to speak into it, to hear her own justifications, to see if she recognized what she'd become in pursuit of status. She thought leadership was performance, but it isn't. It's stewardship, and the mess she left behind, it wasn't invisible anymore. The next morning, I laid the folder on my desk before she arrived. No dramatics, no red ink, just structure. Because when the moment came, I wanted it to be unmistakable. This wasn't personal. This was professional. And I was prepared to speak plainly. To the sister who once stole my job, now seated across from the woman she never thought would return, as her boss. She walked in right on time, no hesitation in her step, no cracks in her expression. She wore the confidence of someone used to being in charge, still clinging to the illusion of control. I motioned to the seat across from me. She sat, crossed her legs, folded her hands. So, she said lightly, my review. I nodded, reached for the folder without ceremony. Let's begin. I started with the basics, performance objectives, project deliverables, timelines. Her nods came quickly, reflexively, like she'd done this before and expected no surprises. But I didn't move quickly. I took my time, turned each page with intent, let the silence stretch between sections. And then I shifted. I've gathered additional insight beyond the surface metrics, I said, my voice even. Team dynamics, execution timelines, attribution of contributions. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Okay. I laid out the first discrepancy, an initiative she claimed sole credit for that originated from 2 junior staffers. I cited dates, emails, version history. She leaned back. I guided that project. They were junior. I helped shape the vision. You removed their names from the final deck, I replied. Twice. Her smile faltered. I continued. Delayed timelines, incomplete briefs, a pattern of miscommunication that didn't originate from beneath her, but from her. She shifted in her chair. There's always context. Things move fast. Teams change. Sometimes wires cross. They don't cross the same way every time unless someone is guiding them that way. I didn't raise my voice. I just read the room. And the room told me she was starting to feel it. The weight of consequence. Real consequence. Not gossip, not sibling scolding, but documented, undeniable proof of leadership failure. Then I opened the final page. Anonymous team feedback, excerpts from exit interviews, phrases underlined. Dismissive tone, takes credit, avoids responsibility. Left the team unsure who was leading. Her jaw tightened. "That's not fair," she said, voice low. "People always want to blame when things don't go perfectly." "They weren't blaming you," I said. "They were describing you." Silence stretched. I watched her eyes scan the documents again. Not reading, processing, trying to find a seam she could pull to undo the narrative. But this time, there wasn't one. "This is a formal performance review," I said, "and unless you can provide verifiable counters to what's been outlined here, HR will proceed with next steps." She didn't answer, not right away, because she knew. She knew what this was. Not revenge, not theatrics, accountability. A mirror held steady, and for the first time in a very long time, she couldn't look away. She didn't speak for a full minute. Her hands rested in her lap, perfectly still. Her eyes darted across the pages again, scanning for weakness, a flaw in the structure, an out, but there wasn't one. The evidence wasn't circumstantial. It was layered, deliberate, complete. When she finally looked up, her voice was quieter. "You really kept all this?" "I did." Her expression changed, just slightly, like she wasn't sure which version of me she was facing. The one she remembered, or the one sitting across from her now? "This feels personal," she said. I leaned back. "It is professional. But if you're asking whether I remember, yes, I do." She didn't ask what I meant. She knew. 5 years might feel long to someone who moves fast. But to someone who documents everything, time only makes things sharper. "The original pitch deck," I said. "The one you used to secure your first role here. It mirrored mine, down to the slide transitions." Her face didn't move, but her shoulders tensed, barely. "I had access to logs, email traces, calendar overlaps. I've kept them." "You're digging up history?" she asked, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "No," I said calmly. "I've just never buried the truth." She folded her arms. "You didn't say anything then." "No, because I wasn't interested in fighting for what was already tainted. I let you have it. I left." "Then why bring it up now?" I paused. "Because the foundation you built here was never yours. And the cracks have finally reached the surface. This review isn't about revenge. It's about consequence and clarity." She looked away then, jaw clenched. For years, she'd moved through this company wearing borrowed brilliance, smiling through performance reviews, selling ideas she hadn't originated, cutting corners and calling it efficiency. And it had worked. Until now. "Everything in this folder is verifiable," I continued. "This isn't a feud. It's a record. And whether you acknowledge it or not, it's already moving forward." Her voice, when it came, was bitter. "You've been waiting for this?" "No," I said. "I've been preparing for this. There's a difference." She stood slowly, gathering the papers like she might fold them into a different shape. One that made more sense. One that felt less final. But the shape of it was clear. "This is far from over," she said. I met her eyes. "You're right. HR will be in touch tomorrow." She held the folder like it might bite her, like the truth inside it had weight she'd never carried before. And then she left. No slammed door, no parting words, just silence. The same silence she mistook for weakness all those years ago. But silence is where I sharpen. And she just stepped into it. It took less than 48 hours. HR moved fast once the review was filed. The documentation was airtight, exit interviews, performance inconsistencies. The complaint logs that had been brushed aside for years were now aligned with formal investigation. By Friday morning, she was on administrative leave. I didn't deliver the news myself. That wasn't my role. The process was internal, official, the way it should have been from the start. But I was copied on the communication, subject line, temporary suspension pending review outcome. No drama, no apologies, just procedure. I read it once, then closed the email. She didn't show up to the office that day. Her desk sat untouched. No whispered rumors, no scene, just absence. Like a thread quietly pulled from a sweater that no one noticed until it unraveled. I walked past her workspace around noon. It looked staged, still too neat. A coffee mug with a branded slogan, a half-used notebook, a stack of folders with her initials printed at the top, symbols of a position built on borrowed time. People asked quiet questions in passing. Is she out sick? Did something happen? I gave no answers. I didn't need to. By Monday, the review panel had met. HR looped in legal. The complaints were deemed credible. The patterns clear. Leadership failure. Unethical attribution of work. Breach of team protocol. They didn't call it theft. But I knew what it was. The final notice came the following Thursday. Termination effective immediately. Access revoked. Badge deactivated. Final compensation to be processed within 30 days. I stared at the notice. No satisfaction. No smile. Just stillness. 5 years ago, she'd stolen my future. Now, I had dismantled the false future she built with it. Not by retaliation, not with noise, with structure, with truth, with the same precision she once underestimated. Later that day, I passed the HR office. The receptionist caught my eye. She came in this morning, she said quietly. Early, before most people. I nodded. I didn't ask for details. She looked surprised, she added, like she didn't believe it until the badge didn't work. I didn't reply, because belief was never the measure. Evidence was. I returned to my office, closed the door, and exhaled. Not relief, completion. The echo of something long buried, now finally silent. She thought the job was the end of the story, that stealing it would close the chapter, but it was only the inciting event. And now, the story had turned. She had climbed with mirrors, but mirrors shatter. And what was left was mine to rebuild. The call started that weekend. Not from her, from family. First, my mother. Did something happen at work? She asked, voice threaded with caution. I paused. Yes. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then the real question. Did you have anything to do with your sister being let go? I didn't flinch. I followed protocol. I upheld my responsibilities. But you knew, she said, barely above a whisper. You knew what she did before. I did. Why didn't you stop it sooner? I looked out the window. The city moved quietly below, unaware of the weight pressing through the line. Because I needed to be the kind of person who didn't just react. I needed to build something she couldn't touch. You sound cold, my mother said. No, I replied. I sound clear. She didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. Next came a text from our cousin. Family shouldn't do this to each other. I didn't respond, because family shouldn't steal from each other either. Family shouldn't weaponize trust or wear your kindness like armor while stabbing from behind. The real weight wasn't in the backlash. It was in the realization that some people would always prioritize comfort over accountability. They wanted resolution without reckoning. They wanted peace, even if it was built on silence. But I no longer made space for that. She was gone from the company now. No send-off, no legacy. Just a line in the HR system marked terminated for cause. Her office sat empty for a week. Then it was reassigned, quietly. No ceremony. The world didn't pause. I heard she tried to contest the decision. Tried to say it was personal, that I was biased, that it was about revenge. But the paperwork didn't carry my name. It carried the truth, collected from 5 years of her own doing. She underestimated that silence could have weight, that restraint could be a weapon sharper than anything loud. I never yelled. I never sought her destruction. But when the time came, I did not shield her. Because protecting someone who harms others isn't loyalty. It's complicity. And I'd already spent enough years pretending not to see. Now, I saw everything. And I acted. That was the difference between us. She played for attention. I played for outcome. And the outcome was this. She left empty-handed. I stayed standing, and the fallout wasn't mine to carry. The office felt different, not louder, not emptier, just quieter. Her absence left a hollow that wasn't noticeable at first. No one said much. No whispered jokes or pointed glances, just the steady rhythm of work moving forward. I sat at my desk, the same one she'd once shared, though we never actually shared it. It was mine now. The light from the window caught the edges of my notebooks, the fresh pens waiting to be uncapped. I didn't rush. I didn't rush anything. There was something sacred in the stillness, the space to rebuild, to reimagine what this place could be without the weight of what had been stolen. Colleagues started to approach me differently, not with fear, not with hesitation, with respect. They asked questions, shared ideas, offered updates without the filter of uncertainty. The team felt the shift, even if they couldn't put it into words. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. What mattered was the work. The steady, quiet work of repair. I reviewed projects personally. I reconnected with people who had left. I opened doors that had been quietly closed. The turnover slowed. The energy softened. It wasn't instant. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. One afternoon, a former analyst stopped by my office. "Thank you," she said, eye steady, "for giving us clarity." That word, clarity, was the one I'd chased since the beginning. Not revenge, not vindication. Clarity. I thought about the years I spent chasing a title, only to find out the fight wasn't for a job. It was for truth, for ownership, for the space to be seen and respected. And now, in the quiet moments, I finally had it. I wasn't just the new director. I was the steward of something harder to steal, of something worth building. The office was quiet now, but in that quiet, I heard possibility, the kind that comes from knowing what's broken and choosing to fix it, not with noise, not with spectacle, but with steady hands and a clear mind. Because this time, the roots I planted were deep, and they were mine. No one could take them away. She thought she buried me, like the earth swallowed every chance I ever had. Like the shadows I left behind could keep me down. But she didn't know I was planting roots, quiet roots, slow, steady, beneath the surface. While she was chasing titles and spotlight, I was building something that couldn't be stolen. Skill, integrity, clarity. The things that don't shout for attention but hold everything up. I think about the woman I was when this started. The one who wanted approval. the one who believed family meant safety, the one who thought the right words could fix everything. She was hopeful, naive. I'm not that woman anymore. I'm someone who understands what it means to wait, to watch, to act with precision. There's power in that. Not the kind that breaks glass or shakes walls, but the kind that bends steel quietly until it can't break anymore. I walk these halls now, and the past feels distant, not forgotten, not forgiven, just contained, like a storm that passed and left a calm sky behind. People ask me if I'm glad, if I feel victorious. I don't answer with celebrations. I answer with silence. Because real victory isn't a moment. It's a state. It's the place where you stand after the noise fades, when everything you've built is yours, when the ground beneath you is steady, when the story you tell yourself is no longer about what was taken, but what you refuse to lose. I still hear whispers sometimes, old memories, the sting of betrayal, the taste of loss. But I don't let them pull me under. I'm anchored now, by purpose, by truth, by the quiet fire that never goes out. She thought the job was hers to keep, but it was never hers to hold. It was mine. And now, it's not just a title, it's a testament to what happens when someone underestimates patience, when they mistake silence for weakness, when they forget that roots grow strong in the darkest soil. I didn't just survive, I became unshakable. And that's the story I carry, not of theft or loss, but of roots, deep and true, growing under ruins, waiting for the right moment to rise. And rise I did.